Russia's war funding is under unprecedented pressure. European sanctions have crippled its trade. Its industry is starved of advanced components, and it's been forced to replenish stockpiles of ammunition faster than ever before. Put together, it's an economic squeeze, unlike any in the modern era. And now Ukraine is preparing to inflict another severe blow, isolating Russia's last remaining sources of revenue. In recent months, the conflict has entered a crucial new phase. For the first time, Ukraine has begun to actively target the transit infrastructure of one of Russia's most important pipelines. The target, the Druzhba pipeline network, which transports nearly 1 million barrels of crude oil daily from Russia to Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Now you might say, "Great, so what? That's not my energy problem. I'm good." Well, hold on, because the wider implications could soon become your problem too. The Druzhba pipeline is Russia's final artery to Europe. While volumes are far below pre-war levels, this vital network is still operational. For decades, Russia has relied on its gargantuan pipeline network to export crude oil across the continent. The largest system is called Druzhba, spanning over 5,500 miles. It carries up to 3.6 million barrels per day. Up until the war, roughly 30% of all European Union crude imports came from Russia via this system. Since February 2022, however, sanctions have dramatically transformed Europe's energy security landscape. As one of the first sanctions imposed, the G7 embargoed Russian seaborne crude and refined petroleum products, coupled with Russia's own voluntary export cuts. This led to a collapse in Russian export volumes to the world's biggest consumers, slashing revenues flowing into the Kremlin. What's more, the European Union expanded its sanctions to cover all Russian LNG and LPG imports. These bans essentially cut off the supply to Europe's biggest markets like Germany and Poland. In this environment, Russia had only a few options. Option number 1, lay low and reduce production to keep prices stable. Option number 2, seek alternative markets. Option number 3, rely on the small landlocked European nations of Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. These nations have no sea access, limiting their import alternatives. As such, they lobbied hard and successfully for exemption from EU sanctions, allowing them to continue importing Russian crude via the Druzhba pipeline. And here's where things get interesting. Over the years, Hungary has benefited massively from cheap Russian energy. But recently, the nation's appetite for oil has grown noticeably weaker. Why? Well, according to an Ember report, Hungary's coal-to-oil switch has almost doubled its oil consumption since 2010. By 2020, transportation accounted for 40% of Hungary's total oil demand. However, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this dependence has become increasingly problematic, especially as domestic refining capacity is minimal. Any shortfall must be imported. This brings us to the present day. According to the latest data, European imports of Russian crude plummeted from 2.4 million barrels per day in 2021 to only 200,000 barrels per day in 2024, a staggering drop of 92%. Of that remaining amount, around 90,000 barrels per day flows through the Druzhba pipeline. Despite the decrease, the line remains an economic lifeline for Russia, earning Putin billions of dollars each year. That's why Ukraine's decision to start targeting the pipeline comes as no surprise. At first glance, it seems counterintuitive. After all, Ukraine has been pummeling Russian refineries for months. An average of 150,000 barrels per day of Russian oil output has been taken offline. So why not target the refineries instead? Well, think of it this way. Refineries generate finished products like gasoline and diesel. The price per barrel is higher, but there's also a risk of the product being stockpiled for future use. By contrast, crude oil has many uses, but it's ultimately meant for refining. The longer it sits in storage, the less valuable it becomes. Hence, the market price of crude is lower, incentivizing immediate sale. And here's the real kicker. When you disrupt the transit of crude oil, you do so at a point in the supply chain where it can't easily be diverted to other routes. Targeting crude transit is about creating an irreversible shock to the Russian economy. And let me underline, this is no accident. Ukrainian officials have been clear about their intention to choke off Russia's revenue streams. In May, Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Defense announced plans to completely shut down Russia's oil and gas sector. Last month, an advisor to Ukraine's energy minister openly discussed targeting oil infrastructure in Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. According to him, this will be done in 2 phases. Phase 1, test the international community's resolve. Phase 2, escalate attacks once consent is given. And that brings us to the present day. In our view, Ukraine has just reached the threshold of Phase 1. The question now is, how will the international community react? We see 3 scenarios unfolding. First, the European response. Europe has decoupled itself from Russian energy. While some members, like Hungary, remain dependent, the EU has introduced sweeping reforms to replace Russian imports. Germany has diversified its LNG supply and brought forward ambitious renewable targets. For Europe, the only official response to these attacks should be condemnation. Anything else would undermine its leadership on the issue. Second, the American response. Washington has been fully supportive of Europe's reforms. With the US as a net exporter of oil, there's little domestic political impact for America. We can expect strong verbal support, perhaps alongside calls for restraint to prevent broader escalation. Third, the Hungarian response. Here, the stakes are highest. Hungary still relies on Russian oil and is fiercely opposed to further EU sanctions. We're tracking 3 critical aspects of its response: the severity of its public denunciation, its diplomatic lobbying efforts in Brussels, and its willingness to diversify away from Russian imports. If Hungary's response is muted, this will signal both to Russia and Ukraine that the risks of escalation are manageable. In this scenario, we could see Ukraine enter Phase 2, targeting the transit infrastructure in greater volume. The attack on September was relatively minor. It caused no fatalities and limited disruptions to flow. Subsequent strikes, however, could rapidly degrade the Druzhba pipeline system. And let's not forget about the potential impact. Disrupting this pipeline would severely limit Russia's energy export capacity. There are no easy workarounds. The nearest alternatives are either full or partially sanctioned, making the Druzhba system the best option available. Moreover, it's the only system capable of transporting large volumes of crude. By contrast, Russia's other major pipeline, the Northern Oil, only transports 1 million barrels per day. But perhaps most importantly, it's located entirely within Russia. Russia could theoretically divert crude to the Northern Lights network, but that would mean reconfiguring its internal transportation logistics, something it hasn't done to date. Finally, any disruption to the Druzhba pipeline system would coincide with Ukraine's ongoing offensive. Kiev could seek to combine both pressures to extract maximum concessions from Budapest. Before closing, we want to highlight that this situation involves complex geopolitics and multiple actors. Each nation has unique interests, dependencies, and alliances. We've attempted to provide a balanced and nuanced analysis, but it's essential to consider various perspectives when discussing these matters. Your insights are invaluable. Please share your thoughts in the comments below and help us all better understand this evolving situation. Together, we can navigate these complexities and work towards a more sustainable and secure future. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more insightful content. Stay updated on our latest videos and be part of our growing community. Until next time, continue to engage with us on our platform and social media channels. Together, we can drive positive change and shape a better tomorrow. Thank you for your support.